Welcome to the Trees and Lines podcast. Today we're joined by Stephen Martin, Senior Strategist, Research and Development at Powerlink Queensland. Tej and I speak with Steve about vegetation management in Australia in general, and specifically about Powerlink's land, asset strategy, bushfire mitigation, and R&D program management. Have a listen. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, Steve. Appreciate your joining us today. Steve, for our listeners and viewers, why don't you take a moment and tell us about yourself and about your program there at Powerlink?
Thanks again, Phil, for the opportunity and the resources that you're providing to the broader utility veg management community. I'm a journeyman, so I've been involved in the industry for around 30 years and part of distribution in my early time and part of transmission for over 20 years now at Powerlink, and came from an environmental background, but my first foray to cut my teeth in the industry was managing vegetation contractors. I've sort of come back to those roots more from a strategic perspective in the last 7 or 8 years in developing strategies for our land assets at Powerlink, as well as managing our R&D program and our fire mitigation program. So, that keeps me busy and engaged as a Powerlink employee. It's exciting times at Powerlink, which is sort of in the northeast corner of Australia, if you can picture the map of Australia. So we've got a fairly diverse environment to work in. Our network travels anything through from desert country in the west, semi-arid, to wet tropics in the north, and everything in between.
So, about how many miles or kilometers of line are you maintaining?
Yeah, at the moment we've got 15,000 route kilometres circuit kilometres, a bit over 10,000 route kilometres. So we've got a fair bit of double circuit, and over the next 10 years we're probably going to double that. So there's a big program of works, capital works, on our books. So
Wow.
a lot happening.
Yeah, good. So, publicly owned?
Yes,
Government
publicly owned
So
by
it
the
is
state
government.
by the state government. Yep.
Yeah, good. So your background's environmental, you said. I think that's what you said.
Yeah, that's my base degree. Yeah.
So when you look at the rights of way and maintaining vegetation, does the utility see it as a nothing but a maintenance cost, or do they view it as an asset that can be managed for other benefits?
That is one of the aspects I really love about the headspace Powerlink's in, and that happened before I came along, is that they manage the land assets as an asset, and it's got attributes, it's got costs that settle against it, there's risks that settle against it, and I'm part of the asset strategies team, and I love that philosophy of treating the environment, the land, the vegetation as assets that need to be managed with the community.
So, Stephen, did you guys know each other through industry at all? Did your paths cross?
So we may have met years ago when
Okay.
I worked down there, but it would have been years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
And more recently, virtually, we've connected on LinkedIn, and
Yeah,
I've
doing all
been
that stuff.
probably stalking Phil, some of the work he's been doing.
Actually, in that sort of vein, how much of your engagement is off the continent? Are you engaging with Europe and North America for ideas, information? Are you pushing out some of your stuff that the rest of us and the rest of the world are adopting? What's your level of international engagement?
Yeah, we're certainly looking to provide Queensland energy consumers with a world-class service. That's our mission at Powerlink. So we're engaged internationally, be it with wildfire, be it with research, or be it with vegetation management. And I'm certainly one of the spear tips for all of those arms at Powerlink. So I get privileged to be involved in quite a bit of international dialogue, both in sharing what we're doing and in learning what others are doing.
So for us, the standard is integrated veg management. I know you're familiar with it. Is that best practice there as well?
Absolutely, yeah. It's right-of-way management, which that's a term that's used in the States, not so much here in Australia, but integrated vegetation management is certainly used in Australia, and the principles are referenced and embedded in the way we manage our land assets. Absolutely.
So you described that you guys are, I think, in the kind of the top right corner of the continent, right, of the country. Maybe describe for our listeners, like when you break Australia down, the in quadrants, are the principles and the techniques and the strategies that are applied in Queensland very similar to what's going on in the rest of the country? Or because I know in the U.S., like it's so wide ranging as you move from California east. As you move over the flyover states and then into the east, it's just the strategies are just so varied, and the risks are very different. So, maybe describe for us a little bit of the topography that you're dealing with.
Yes, even within Queensland, there's diversity. So, in the wet tropics, we're going over World Heritage areas, and we've got structures that overspan the rainforest up there. So, our veg management strategy there is very different to something that we might have built in southeast Queensland and to central Queensland to connect large generators across grazing areas. That were single circuit, low profile, no room to retain a lot of vegetation. And so you're basically dealing with grasses and herbs only as compatible with that sort of structure, and everything in between. So just within in our service area, it's diverse. Um, and that means we have to have some internal expertise to be able to interpret what IVM means for those various contexts. And there's more diversity the more you go around Australia. The further south you go, I guess you get into more Mediterranean climate. So you've got hot, dry summers. Typically in Queensland, even in the western parts, when it gets hotter, you tend to get some more humidity. So our fire risk traditionally has been lower than the southern states, but we've certainly had a number of incidences since November 2018 was the first time that we had some catastrophic fire weather in Queensland. So that's certainly started to pique our interest that we can't just rest on the past history. The climate is changing and it's getting hotter and drier in Queensland too.
Your biggest fire was a little bit earlier than that, wasn't it? Might not have been Queensland, but wasn't there like
Oh yeah,
2010 Black
look,
Saturday?
yeah. Down in southern parts of Australia, there's been terrible fires at other times, absolutely. But for us in Queensland, our worst fire seasons have been around November 2018 and November 2019, and leading into December as well. But yeah,
And it
thankfully it
looks
tends to.
every indication is the fires are going to be more frequent, or at least the conditions for it are
Yes,
favorable.
yes,
Yeah.
Here the utilities, they have to submit their plans and their budgets to the local state regulators and for approval, and then all of those costs get kind of bundled up and passed to the ratepayer. Is that the same relationship with your regulators as well?
a little bit different. We're as a transmission entity, we're um, economically regulated at a national level, and then from an electrical safety perspective, that's at a state level. But yeah, the costs are assessed every 5 years by a national regulator.
What about the veg management practices? Is that regulated in any way or outcomes regulated?
I guess that would rest more with the electrical safety regulator, and there's an annual audit to renew our license to make sure that we're doing things safely. That would be the main area that we question on our veg management programs. and fire mitigation.
General terms, IVM, but tell us a little bit about the program. You must have, is it cycle-based or on condition based?
Yeah. So we've a long history of cycles, and we're introducing in the last few years an annual review process that feeds in a number of risk factors to then look at what are the potential cycle buster spans. So that's structure to structure as a span, and we'll then have a more intensive look at those ones to see if they're on the right cycle or whether we need to go an intervening sort of cycle and make sure we're maintaining them safely. So we're trying to move towards data driven and maybe disperse the cycles. It's just built sections are done when they're needed, but we've still got more data collection to go to have confidence in that.
Yeah, definitely moving towards data driven everywhere, which means technology. So
Absolutely.
tell us what you're doing there. Remote sensing, work management systems.
Yeah, all of the above. So I think we started with some baseline LiDAR, and I think anyone that does their first round of LiDAR gets a fright with all the data and look at the exclusions and or intrusions, and so yeah, we moved out of that space and we've leveraged that data set to then and with that, we're also using freely available satellite imagery as risk factors to feed into our veg management programs. Things like soil types, veg communities, greenness of the vegetation, rainfall. So they were feeding in, and we're maturing it. We just see satellite data sets as a more sustainable way of managing our corridors, which we're trying to keep vegetation a long way away from our transmission conductors. So we're looking to also integrate fire management. We don't necessarily light fires, but people who are doing mitigation burns, we'd like to encourage them to use our corridors both to burn off as well as to burn across. And we need to coordinate with them to make sure that's done safely. So that's that. As far as the technology goes, then we're looking at fire scars. So that's something we're introducing, and the fire scars can either disrupt our herbicide treatment of vegetation, or it could be an opportunity to go back within 12 months to hit incompatible species that are, easy to get just after a fire when you've got fresh shoots.
One of your country mates who joined our podcast early on, Nigel Berry. I don't know if you've had crossover with Nigel in your time in this space, but he and his team have built some pretty interesting software solutions. Have you and Nigel had some crossover in the Australian market?
We've touched base, but it's fair to say that I'm not the SME in that space. So a colleague of mine, John Mockler's leading the charge with that technology integration, and I'm providing, the philosophies and the strategies that it should be following.
Yeah. So Stephen, I'm always peppering Phil with questions like this because I like to contextualize the market and understand, who's leading in the space. And, given that, you're across a bunch of bodies of water, from your lens and your time in the space, is there a group out there? Is there a utility out there? Is there a private company out there that's really kind of ahead in the veg space that has been setting the standards over the years that you kind of look at and say, we always use them as a marker? Whether that's in Europe, Australia, North America, can you provide some context? Because again, I think our audience and our listeners, they like the context, right? And sometimes they want to hear their own names, be mentioned. So I'm kind of curious, if there's a group out there.
Yeah, look, I had the fortune in 2018 to go to the Right of Way symposium in Denver, and
nice.
and was fortunate enough to be able to present on a couple of papers that we're doing here. Um, I was blown away with and it's one of my motivations for going to that symposium was the depth of understanding and research and evidence that exists in the States and in Canada around pollinators and the benefits of pollinators and the function that right of ways can provide as a positive, I guess, environmental benefit from IVM approach. So that body of work doesn't exist in Australia. So I'd tip my hat to the States, and one of my legacies I'm hoping to leave as part of my work with Powerlink is establishing some long-term monitoring plots with good baseline research and looking at the types of treatments we do over time to look at the change in vegetation communities and having universities do research on it. And yeah, so I'd love to, in 50 years' time, to be where I think the body of research in the US and Canada has around the benefits of pollinators and whatnot. So, not without singling anyone out, I think that body of work is fantastic. There's various, John Goodfellow as a fellow journeyman, but heads and shoulders above me, somebody that I have
Legend of the
admired.
space.
Yeah, legend of this space, and somebody I reference and go to for advice. And Alex Bloss from ATCO. So he's doing some great work with coordinating planned burns with national parks up in his part of the world, working with First Nations people, integrating it with researchers. So he's somebody I think we're on parallel paths, and we're ahead in one aspect and he's ahead in others. So he's somebody that I compare notes with regularly internationally. And somebody that I met at the Right of Way Symposium, Stan Verart, I'll shout out to him.
Stan's great.
Yeah, he's such a, he'll cut through with different thought processes and challenge the way you're doing things. And I've done some pilot work with Stan and his team to try and find a grazing animal area on our network. We found some areas that were suitable. We didn't get any takers as far as landholders that were willing to do it with us. And I've tried some local suppliers and came up with a similar sort of result. So I'm hoping I can cross that bridge one day. But
Stephen, you mentioned universities. Like an ongoing conversation here in the States is the depth chart for resources, the depth chart of knowledge, right? Like you've obviously got the likes of Phil and John Goodfellow and a whole host of other folks that have been leading in the space for quite some time. And then, the labor force is somewhat limited, and it's not catching up with the work, right? The volume of the work. So are you guys having a similar issue, or have you been planning for this as an industry a little bit better?
Oh no, we're and given the amount of capital works we've got on our program, there's a huge ramping up going on. So something I have been involved in previously, and we're re-engaging with that, is having development programs. So as you say, it's hard to get those experienced people because they're in demand. So we're certainly revisiting, because of the expansion, a development program where people get the opportunity to get experience in different parts of the business, so that at the end of that few years, they've learned about the business, they understand where their skill sets are best suited, and we can put them to good use. So and that's whether it's engineering, whether it's environmental, whether it's
At sort of the management role, what about your field workers? Do you have an adequate supply? Most utilities are struggling there.
For sure. Look, we've we're only 12 months into a new contract model, and I think we've tried to design the contract model to try and help there as far as giving contractors long-term patches to manage, try and smooth out the workflows so that it's not too picky that they're having to bring in short-term workers to get over those peaks. So um, with performance indicators and empowering them more. So we've tried to put a model out there that'll help enable them to sustainably recruit and retain good staff. But yeah, there's still challenges for sure.
How much are you playing with outage data? There's a lot of different stakeholders that care about outage data, right? The utilities themselves, right, to respond to customers, but you also have people that trade the electricity markets and are speculating on electricity prices that care about outage data. And of course, here in the States, unbeknownst to me, vegetation, trees were the largest cause of outages. And how much of that data has been circulating, utilized, collected, analyzed? Where are you guys in that process?
Yeah, I'm fortunate there a little bit. I think it went hand in glove with our approach to land asset management. Um, Obviously, a lag indicator of whether you're doing a good job is whether you're getting outages around your asset management. And so I've got good data sets on whether our veg management programs or fire and wildlife or lightning, whatever the various causes might be, what's causing the outages and what the trend lines are. And there's an investigation into anything that's significant. And we've got trained up investigators for the different types of skills that we need to look at. So I've got increasing confidence with our data sets there, and I'm happy to report it's trending downwards. It's hard to get down to zero and sustain zero. Obviously, there's always something that'll be a blip on the radar, but we've got low numbers. Yeah.
Like, are you guys also sharing any resources with like New Zealand, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea? Like, is there any, uh, yeah, like is there any relationship outside of Australia with neighboring countries?
Yeah, there's so ENA Energy Networks Australia is currently having a conference in Adelaide. So that's also brings in New Zealand from time to time, and this one's got the New Zealand people there. So yeah, I'm not at that one this year. I didn't get a Guernsey, but there's a good cohort of Powerlink people down there, and there's certainly sharing of knowledge and expertise there every year. So they have a national conference, and there's various streams. So there's a uh, International Wildfire Risk Management Consortium annual conference also happening in Adelaide next week. Um, and we have a utility arb association in Australia that's they're having an annual conference in Melbourne later in the year. So yeah, we certainly get together and compare notes. Um, Sometimes there's some reluctance to share outage data because you don't want that getting in the wrong hands and being, I guess, weaponized.
I get it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I get it. I understand. Yeah,
yeah.
that's funny.
We've covered a real range of topics. When you look down the road, where do you think the biggest challenges are going to emerge, or what are you worried about, or what are the opportunities? Just a little vision casting.
Fire continues to be the one that grabs my attention because it's been so far from our thoughts and management practices in the past in Queensland that that I think with that increasing climate change, increasing um, likelihood and intensity of the fires occurring, particularly based on the forecasting the southern parts of the state, um, that I think we need to be, and that's why we're part of international forums to try and learn from what other people are doing. And we're fortunate being publicly owned that we're able to talk with our state agencies directly um, around fire mitigation that's happening at a landscape. So we're we're coordinating their planned burn programs with our maintenance programs, and I'm happy that we're doing the best we possibly can. But it still worries me,
Yeah.
it's
Well, at least you're being proactive. So many
yeah.
utilities don't wake up until it's has to be a reaction.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. How big is your team, Steve? Like, what's the size of the Powerlink Veg land management team?
Yeah. Look, it's internally, we've got, say, a half a dozen easement officers, but then we've got another half a dozen easement officers run by our distribution utility that provides services for us in other parts of the state, and then there's a whole heap of contractors that, yeah, I couldn't give you a number for those
Yeah, but
guys,
just
but
pretty sizable.
yeah. So we're probably over a dozen internal people and sizable contractor staff.
The trend we've seen here in the U.S., of course, is on the back of usually an event, a fire, a large storm, something that has impacted the infrastructure. We'll see budgets kind of, go up, in the next 3 to 5 after an event, before it sort of tapers off. Similar situation post 1819. Have the dollars that you've been able to work with expanded so you can take on more
No,
initiatives?
no, that's an interesting question.
You're like, no.
No, not the case. We've I strategically, our position as a publicly owned utility has been that we don't want to add to the electricity customers' bill. So when we've had our most recent review, we've just put in a flat OPEX just with CPI. So there's no big change, just
Right. So you're playing
evolutionary.
budgetary Tetris is what you have to work with.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where that annual review and risk factors feed in to make sure that you're managing your highest risk. And yeah, if you've got a cycle, whether it's the right cycle, and
Very good.
Fascinating. Are you do you ever find yourself stateside, or are you planning to make any trips this way over the next year or two?
yeah, look, I absolutely loved my time in the States in 2018, and certainly plan to come back. I certainly was one of my bucket lists for the right of way symposium. I'd always looked with, I guess, yeah, admired the work that was happening out of those symposiums. So it was great to attend that. And then, yeah, going around the States and going to the national parks, heading up into Canada was just the landscape was breathtaking, and love to get back there. And there's some great work. I'd love to find out more with colleagues. PG&E are doing some great work in California too. I
Yeah,
know
they really are.
Cameron, yeah, it's amazing the result, as you were describing when you talk about resources. It's just incredible the resources that they're putting at their issues, and mind blowing what could happen if you had the resources. Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely.
So trees and utilities is in September. And
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
probably the one that
That's
brings the most in. So
yes.
encourage you to consider that one year too.
Absolutely, Phil, and that's the other one that I've looked at, and seeing I've been to the right of way symposium, I'll target the trees and utilities one next time.
Yeah.
They're both good conferences.
Yeah, it's again, Stephen, as I mentioned, the industry generally is pretty new for me. I've been now engaging with the space for the last few years, and that trees and utilities I found to be extremely engaging. Some great speaking sessions, in fact, a lot of the interaction with the different stakeholders, and how everybody comes together, shares ideas, and also just it's a great social gathering of your industry peers. So, yeah, to the extent that you could prioritize that one, I'd recommend that one for sure.
And it's in Tej's backyard this year. We'll
Yeah,
take you to dinner this year.
yeah, Dallas. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for the invite.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's we're dealing with some time zone stuff, so we really appreciate you coming on and sharing some perspectives and a little bit of your story. So, really enjoyed the chat today. So, thanks again.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate the time. It was good. Let's get together, and if you need help putting your tour of piers together, give me a call.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
That would be fun to do.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.